علي آهاتك وحروف حسراتك ضميت كلماتك بيني العابرة حنيت لمصابك ونيت يم بابك تانيت لجوابك يا ابني الزهرة شما اشتاق انا لعطرك تربة مرقدك اشتم ذكرك لو يمر عالبال صاحي وباسمك اتحلم كل موكب من اسمع صوت يا حسين اتألم ذبتك لو سمه يا بن فاطمة راية مرقدك لو لامست خد الهوى يموت ما شفتك لجن صرت انت الوطن يا مسمع تراث البيع شيك.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولله ملك السماوات والأرض والله على كل شيء قدير. ولله ملك السماوات والأرض والله على كل شيء قدير. ولله ملك السماوات والأرض والله على كل شيء قدير. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب. الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. ربنا إنك من تدخل النار فقد أخزيته وما للظالمين من أنصار. ربنا إننا سمعنا مناديا ينادي للإيمان أن آمنوا بربكم فآمنا. ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ربنا وآتنا ما وعدتنا على رسلك ولا تخزنا يوم القيامة إنك لا تخلف الميعاد. صدق الله العلي العظيم.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير، والصلاة والسلام وتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد، اللهم صل على وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا، اللهم صل على وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، إن الدين عند الله الإسلام. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman across the globe, Salamun alaykum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question: what is the proof of the existence of God? We've been discussing the concept of purpose and meaning in life. That is the quest for meaning in one's life. And in this conversation, we have covered a substantial amount of ground. And we have looked at these factors that may have given rise to your belief system, your worldview, your narrative of how you see the world. And many a times we understood and we analyzed that viewpoint, as philosophers have said, that your views are not your own, your thoughts are not your own, that you tell me the time and the space in which you exist, the place in which you exist, the era in which you exist, and I will tell you your thoughts before you even utter a word, before you even open your mouth. Therefore, we are products of our environment, whether we realize it or not. That can be your physical environment, your geographic environment, or, for example, that can be in the modern era, the digital sphere, the digital space, those conversations that you are part of and that are happening at the largest level, at the highest level, in the realm of social media and the likes. All of these work together to build a narrative, to build a worldview, to build an understanding, a perception of how the world operates and how the world should operate. But at the same time, it's very important to understand what is our view from the perspective of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, from the perspective of Islam, and from the ultimate perspective of God Almighty and what He wanted us to believe and strive towards and have and adopt in our lives. Building on these concepts, tonight we look at some of the more deeper questions of existence, the foundational layer of our belief system. As has been highlighted by our scholars, led by the Maraja', that one of the advices that has been given to lecturers, speakers during the time of Muharram is to discuss and try to eradicate some of the doubts that may be in someone's mind, and with solid proof and solid evidence. Understanding that the foundational element of our belief is understanding what was taught to us, the preservation of the faith by the Ahlul Bayt and their close circle, the preservation of the faith and the preservation of the faithful. You see, the question really boils down to, what is the most valuable thing that you possess? What is the most valuable thing that you have in your life? Is it your house? Is it your car? Is it your property? Is it your wealth? What is it? One may say, it's my material possessions, my house, my car, my properties, my bank balance, so on and so forth. And even if you go in the secular domain, not necessarily in religion, you ask someone who's an entrepreneur, as I've asked some, and you may have asked many more in your lifetime, so successful businessmen, successful entrepreneurs, they will say that it's not their property, it's not their car, it's not their house, but rather it's one thing and one thing alone. It is the heart and the mindset. The mindset and the heart. These two things, that is, the mindset which gives the learning and all of those elements that come with it, and the heart that gives the initiative and the drive to execute on what you know. Then you realize that none of these material possessions matter. Why? Because in an instant, your property, your house, your car, your possessions can be taken from you in an instant, in a moment. As they were in the recession, for example, the Great Recession from 2008, 2009, 2010. But if everything is taken tomorrow, how can you build everything? If, for example, you inherit your wealth, how can you rebuild? How can you reestablish? How can you get everything back, so to speak? It's based on what you believe in your heart and in your mind and what you execute on. Similarly, the most valuable thing that you possess in your life is not your house, not your property, is none of that. Although those are important and those aren't things that I'm belittling in any way. Those are important, and there's an Islamic dimension to those, a religious narrative with respect to all of those that we should strive towards. Seeking a halal sustenance, a halal livelihood, seeking and being and having good family relations. All of these things are very important for development reasons. However, the most important thing that you possess in your life, whether you realize it or not, is the belief in Islam, the belief in tashayyu', the belief in that concepts and those philosophies, the preservation of the faith that has been given to you over generations, that has come to you in its correct form. That is the most important thing. Why? Because it is a spring. It is the fountain of all the good in your life. That is, that if you truly believe in the faith in the right way, you will be a kind person, a compassionate person, a hardworking person, a person who contributes to society, a person who looks after not only their responsibilities to their Creator, to their Lord, but also their responsibility to the creation. That is the responsibility to the neighbor, the responsibility to the classmate, the responsibility to the colleague, the responsibility to everyone in society. In Islam, for instance, for example, that we are not bound by this concept or this idea that it is only me and to me to look after myself. For example, the concept of neighbor in Islam is not right and left of me. Rather, the concept of neighbor in Islam is 40 houses, east, west, north, south. And in fact, the traditions go on to say that if any of those individuals goes to sleep hungry while I have eaten on a given night, that I am liable on the Day of Judgment. That they can ask me, they can question me, what did you do? That you ate and this individual went hungry in your own vicinity? This is the extent of the rights of other people, of human beings on this planet, as taught to us by Islam. Having said that, at the same time, we want to, in essence, take the best elements, the best aspects of professionalism, of progress, of development, of the modern world, and merge that with a worldview that is God-centric, that is the worldview of the Ahlul Bayt. No, rather I should say that when you adopt the worldview of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the worldview of Islam in its truest sense, you will encapsulate within it the benefits of modernity, the benefits of all of that, while still have meaning in your life. It is not either or. If you truly understood Islam, if you truly understood the school of thought of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, I remember when we had the opportunity to visit the scholars in Najaf al-Ashraf, I was astonished by how much these top-level scholars were saying, refer to the experts in those domains. That is, that refer to the expert in medicine, in the domain of medicine, refer to the expert in, for example, social affairs and the issues of social matters, refer to the expert of the respective domains on those matters. Yes, where there is an element of religion, where religion explicitly comments on the matter, indeed you must adhere to that. But we do not live in a world that is devoid of the modern sciences of progress and development. However, at the same time, we do not make that our God, so to speak. Having said all of this and having kept all of these elements in mind, I would like to bring your attention to our conversation and topic of conversation tonight and this evening. And that is understanding the God-centric life in order to implement meaning and have true meaning in our lives. To understand this, we'll look at number one, what does the research say? What do the studies of our modern world say with respect to the relationship of religion and the young person who's living in our modern world? How do young people in our world look at religion? And what's the relationship there? The second level after that is what the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam said, and what proof and evidence did they give to the agnostics of their time, of the atheists of their time, with respect to the existence of God Almighty, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What was the view of the Ahlul Bayt in general on this issue, and in particular what was the view of Imam al-Hussein as described in some of his words leading up to Karbala. And finally, what was that individual and who was that individual that on the plains of Karbala showed his absolute certainty and yaqeen in the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam on that fateful day of Ashura. These are the levels of analysis which we will include, the philosophical, the scientific, and the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the most important element in order to understand this issue in its comprehensive detail. From the bottom of your heart, wherever you may be, across the globe, send a salawat on Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The first element that I would like to share with you, my beloved dear audience, here is that a study was conducted by researchers, including from various institutions, including the University of Notre Dame and others, that looked at young people and religion in America. And this was one of the largest studies that has ever been conducted on this topic. Over 2,000 young people participated in this study. And they were asked about what is their relationship with God, what is their relationship with religion, and what type of religion, what do they follow? And this questionnaire was designed in a way to truly understand the psyche and the psychology of the young person who is endeavoring in our modern world. But I should note that it's not limited to the young person. You will find parallels across the board here. So what did this study that was conducted by researchers from the top institutions across the country look at, and what did it find? It found three fundamental, clear-cut conclusions based on the questionnaire that they gave and the study that they conducted on young people and faith in America. They found, number one, that young people in America are not able to do what? Speak about their faith intelligently with depth. What does that mean? By the way, do not think that Europe is immune to this. Do not think that other countries are immune to this. This is a global phenomenon, although the set of data was predominantly from North America. Number one, the group identified that young people, with respect to their religion, they could not speak in depth about their religious beliefs. What does that mean? So, for example, they would say, I believe in God. Very good, very well. But what else do you believe? For example, in Christianity, for example, in Judaism, or for example, similar religions. What is your belief system? Do you believe in one God, multiple gods? What type of God do you believe in? What are your religious duties? What are your religious obligations? This would be similar to someone asking a Muslim, for example, do you believe in Usuluddin, What are the usul ad-din? Do you believe in furu' ad-din? What are the furu' ad-din? What are those obligations? What's the philosophy behind them? Or at least some light and some understanding from what the scholars have said about why these things are in place. What are these obligations? When do I have to do them? All of these elements. The research found, number one, that most people are able to say they believe in God or they do not believe in God, but most young people in America are not able to say what they believe beyond that. That's about the extent of it, number one. Number two, the research found that for most young people in the West, in America in particular, religion is just not that important. That means it's just not a priority. It's not first on the list, it's not second on the list, it's maybe down the list, way down the list, if it's on the list at all. A reality which many people who interact and many people who are young themselves know very well. That the primary focus in life is not religion in our modern world. Rather, the religion developed based on, those things that are convenient to me, which will come to the next element. But where did this mindset of religion not being that important emerge from? And how can we tackle this? This is a very important concept that needs to be understood. So the second was, religion is just not that important. This is what the research found. The third element, which is a very interesting insight from the research study, was that most young people, with respect to faith, they follow a form of religion which the researchers call moralistic therapeutic deism. Moralistic therapeutic deism, MTD. What is that? MTD, or moralistic therapeutic deism, is this concept of God on demand. That is, God is on my periphery. God is on the sideline. God is not my main focus. God is there when times get bad, when things are difficult. I reach out to God and I say, God, I need you. Come and help me at this point in time. And when things are good, when things are normal and I'm smooth sailing and coasting, as they say, therefore, I don't have to worry about God at that time. God's not that important. God's not a priority in my life. It's a sort of a God on demand, as the researchers say. A God who's there for convenience and for therapy. Moralistic, therapeutic deism. Starting with deism, this idea that I believe in a God versus don't believe in a God. So if you ask me if I believe in God, I believe in God. That's what the research finds. Therapeutic, that this God, that when I need Him, He's there. I'm having a tough time. God, you're there. I can call you up, so to speak, when I need you. And therapeutic, that He's there to offer therapy. When I'm in a difficult situation, I reach out to this God. However, when times are good, when there's no issues in my life, I neither have a need for God, so He's neither therapeutic, neither is He moral, and neither am I necessarily deistic. Neither do I necessarily even believe in God. Because other times, scientism, for example, progress, all of these things are serving in the capacity of God as me. Because consider for a moment that the concept of polytheism is not limited just to physical deities. That means that I don't necessarily only have to create an idol in my house and worship that idol physically and prostrate towards that idol to be shirk. Of course, that is a form. But I can create an ideology, a concept, and in some form, in some capacity, I can do an element of shirk without realizing it. Have you had this deep concept and this idea and this deep conversation internally with yourself to understand truly what you believe? Do you truly believe in Tawheed? Do you truly believe in the Ahlul Bayt? Do you truly believe? Or do we do with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do we do with the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam the same thing as what modern science is finding about the modern world and young people? I say this because we must understand where that worldview came from. Where did this concept and this idea come from of religion just not being that important? Well, if you read the history, you will find that there was an era in time, especially in the 1800s, the 1900s, and the 20th century and beyond, that found that religion, there was a movement to say religion must be removed. That religion is the cause of all the violence that exists in the world. This narrative became very popular throughout Europe, for example, because of this time and space in which that narrative emerged. What happened? Well, Europe had gone through a series of wars between Catholics and Protestants, and most of these religions fought against each other, and they masked political, economic, and social issues. They masked the argument under the garb of religion. When they masked it under the garb of religion, what happened was people began to get duped and fooled, and they said, religion is the cause of the violence. If they say that religion is the cause of the violence, that means that if you remove the religion from the equation, there should be no more violence. But if you come to the 20th century, in particular World War I and World War II, or Communist China, or the Bolsheviks in Russia, you will find millions and millions, tens and tens of millions of people killed. Was that in the name of religion? What religion was that in the name of? You will find that this was not the solution. This in philosophy is called the fundamental attribution error. That the society made a fundamental error in attributing the problem of society as saying it was religion that was causing the violence. If religion was causing the violence, you remove religion, there should no longer be violence. But the reality was shown in the 20th century, when the world wars emerged, when Communist China emerged, when the Bolsheviks in Russia emerged, secular movements that all showed that religion was not the issue. It was political, socio-economic issues that were masked in this garb. You must be much more sophisticated in how you see the world and understand where these narratives are coming from, so that we understand what is our view of the world and how do we see the world. Our Ahlul Bayt alayhimussalam have made it so clear and categorical the concept of Tawheed. The Ahlul Bayt would speak to people on their level so they would understand and they would grasp these concepts and they would embed them in their hearts and their minds. How? The atheists, the agnostics of that time were much more sophisticated, in fact, than our modern era and modern time. Many atheists of our modern world, especially the militant atheist form, or those of people who are very aggressive in their atheism, not to make judgments on anyone. We're not here to make judgments on the people in the study of the Notre Dame University and other collaborators, or atheists. We're making an argument of rationale and logic here. And what you will find is many times, many of these conversations in the modern world delve into emotion. When we come to the message of Karbala, when we come to the message of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, which is connected and not at any moment disconnected with any of the other Imams and their stand or their sitting, we realize that Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam's message was founded on the basis of absolute certainty in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Absolute calm and ease of mind with respect to God Almighty. When we look at this, we see the Ahlul Bayt operated with absolute clarity. Again, I repeat, your thoughts, your ideas may not be your own. We need to understand what the Ahlul Bayt shared in terms of belief system. I say this why? If you look at our world, we live in uncertain times. How do we live in uncertain times? We live in a time where there's a global pandemic. People don't know what the world will be like next year, what our environment will be like. There's so many questions. But we think that in terms of this environment, does this have an impact on us? There's already studies that are coming out that are saying that this global pandemic has led our minds to change in a way that we've not seen, or at least not seen in our lifetime. What do I mean? Or at least we haven't remembered. What do I mean? If you go back to the pages of history, as Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen told his son in his wasiyah, study the pages of history, and it is as if I had walked amongst the ruins of past civilizations and saw what brought them good and saw what brought them harm. You and I should also study the pages of history to learn, based on what Imam alayhi said. Huxley, the English philosopher and writer, he says, perhaps the greatest lesson of history is that man does not take lesson from history. Yet history is there open for those who want to study it. Now, what happened? If you look at our world, many people have noticed that divorce rates have gone up. Many people have noticed that, in fact, those who are not married have urged and hastened and rushed towards marriage as well. Is this something that is a new form of thinking? Or is it possible that the way most human beings think is common? And whether we realize it or not, we think we are special, but that may not be the case. What do I mean? Allow me to explain. In 1906 in California, there was a very bad earthquake that took place. This earthquake shook the reality of people as they knew it, so to speak. And in this resulting environment, you saw a very interesting environment. People in the aftermath of the uncertainty of the earthquake in 1906, in April of 1906 in California, they all rushed, a huge surge of men and women rushed to get married right away. To the extent that one individual, the researchers cite in a book called Nonsense, Making Sense of the Unknown, the researchers cite that one individual in particular, he went to get married with his wife and he did not even know the name of his bride-to-be. And yet he was married. This is the level of haste with which people got married. On the flip side, if you come to South Carolina in 1989, roughly 83 years on, at that point in time, you notice an environment where a very strong hurricane swept through South Carolina. And when this very strong hurricane swept through South Carolina, what happened as a result of it? They noticed that the rate of divorce skyrocketed like it has never skyrocketed before in the aftermath, in the wake of the hurricane. At the same time, the researchers also cite that those people who were engaged or in discussions about marriage, they went straight to the jewelry shop to buy a ring for their prospective spouse. So, what is the insight that we can glean and take from this? That history repeats itself, number one, but two as well, we may think that our thoughts are original and we think that we have deduced our thoughts on our own, yet we may be influenced, we may be impacted by the world around us, whether we realize it or not. This happens at the smallest level and at the highest level. The question you want to ask is, how much influence do the Ahlul Bayt truly have on you and I? How much influence does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have on you, and how much does He have on myself? Truly. And are they the focal point of our lives, or are they on the peripheral, on the side? Remember, if you remember the example of the blind men and the elephants, the blind men were looking at one aspect or feeling one aspect of the elephant. They did not see the comprehensive picture. Science is good, progress is good, evolution, all of these things. But they should not be in a framework that is devoid of God. They should not be separated from God. We're told there's a moment in time where a man by the name of Abu Shakir, he had some doubts and some skepticism, and he had some questions. Remember, questions are not bad. There's nothing wrong with questions. Questions, in particular, in our school of thought, are highly encouraged. However, once you ask the question, either saying it or in your heart, you should seek out the answer. And do not relent and do not give up until you get the answer. Make sure you struggle for that. Because if you ask a question and leave it to fester in your heart, if you ask a question and leave it in your mind, if you ask a question and just leave it on your lips, you will find that as time progresses, that question in your heart, that question in your mind, that question will brew and brew. The same way that tea brews, the same way that coffee brews, it begins to brew. At some point, it eventually boils over. When it eventually boils over, the result of that, the impact of that, the result of that boiling and spilling over leads to many people adopting agnosticism or adopting other faiths and other religions outside of Islam, or it leads to them going towards atheism. And this was true in the Imam's time as well. Abu Shakir comes to our sixth Imam, Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, Yabna Rasulillah, what's the proof? What's the evidence of God? Where is He? Imam alayhi salam, he sees a young boy from the household passing by. When he sees this young one, he has an egg in his hand. When he has this egg in the hand, Imam says, may I please see this egg? The young boy gives it to the Imam. The Imam takes it and he lifts it and he looks at it. He says, Abu Shakir, what if I told you that there was a fortress, and inside this fortress there was a thin film that covered this, and inside that fortress there was the film, and inside the film there was molten silver, and inside that molten silver there was molten gold. So inside the fortress of film, inside the film, liquid molten silver, inside the molten liquid silver, molten liquid gold. Abu Shakir, what if I told you that neither the gold mixes with the silver and neither the silver mixes with the gold? And Abu Shakir, what if I told you that from this fortress will emerge a creature that will eventually have a beak and eventually have eyes and eventually have feathers and eventually may fly and eventually have all of these things. Yet Abu Shakir, no one went inside of this fortress to shape it and mold it and design it, and no one came out from it except that creature. Abu Shakir, do you accept? At that point in time, this man began to become perplexed. He had realized that how is it that this creature, this bird that emerges from this egg, no one went inside to design it, no one went inside to fashion it, yet it emerges with all the perfection of the feathers, with all the perfection of the skin and the beak and all of those elements that become a creature and a creation. He had understood. And it was a marvelous example of how the Imam spoke to people on their own level. The answers are there. We are told there's a moment in time where our 8th Imam, Imam al-Rida alayhi salatu wassalam, is asked by the people, Yabna Rasulillah, can you please tell me, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create all these different types of creation? Why so many different types of birds, and why so many different types of fish, and why so many different types of plants and animals and every single creation? So many. In fact, in our modern world, when you go to the Amazon, you will begin to notice that there are so many different types of creatures and species that are being discovered in the Amazon every day that we don't know about, and in other rainforests and in other habitats in Africa and throughout in Australia that we don't even know about, that are emerging every single day. And yet, the Imam was asked this centuries ago. Oh, Yabna Rasulullah, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create so many different creations? We are told that it is attributed to the Imam that he responded, that's so that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment, no one can say and bring in the court of Allah, oh my Lord, I created this, I created so and so, I created this creation which you did not think of or did not fathom. That every day we are finding new creations in the depths of the oceans, the new creations in the rainforests and beyond. The world today, people are going towards Mars. The likes of Jeff Bezos and the likes of Elon Musk are going towards Mars. There are still other people such as Ray Dalio who is saying, let us go into the oceans and the depths of the oceans and explore and see what life is like there. The Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam said, what creation, what different creations has Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created that you cannot fathom, that you do not realize, that you do not even recognize. Yet many of us have not understood the scientific dimensions of what the Ahlul Bayt had highlighted and alluded to and what true science says. Therefore, I come to the next element of our equation to understand this concept. Many people have come forward and said that, for example, what is evolution? What is Darwinism? If you recall in the previous lecture, we said that certain narratives, which were individual narratives, they became intertwined, like DNA. When they became intertwined, they became one narrative that gave rise to a narrative of modernity in our modern world, which many people follow. What was that narrative? What was that viewpoint of the world? That viewpoint of the world, according to science and modernity, became this idea of evolution, of Darwinism and progress combined together. And much of it became devoid of God, whether consciously or subconsciously. Evolution and Darwinism. Allow us to discuss this for a brief moment. What is this concept and why is it very important? Because the concept of survival of the fittest, the concept of evolution, these two things have been the foundational elements of progress in our modern society. The concept of modernity is based fundamentally on this idea that times get better. This century is better than the previous century, although ethically that may not be the case. But still, progress says this century is better, and the next century will be even better. Although we may go back in terms of principles, we may go back in terms of ethics, but that is not taken into the equation. And the Darwinian element, that survival of the fittest. There is no problem in terms of Darwinism. There is no problem in our belief system in terms of evolution. The issue is this idea of scientism, which takes over in place of religion. Again, science has its very important and very useful place. As we've said, in the example of the blind man and the elephant, it is looking at the trunk, it is looking at the tusk, it is looking at for example, the feet individually, but comprehensively, the real vision, the worldview is God-centric. That's the most important element. But science has a place. The scientist is a mystic who is unlocking the keys of God's universe. God is not someone who's playing dice with the world, as Einstein said. Having said this, what does evolution say? What does Darwinism say? It's very important to understand this. When this concept of Darwinian evolution or the origin of species was published by Darwin, In the 1860s, at the turn of the century, in the middle of the 1800s, in the middle of the 19th century, when it was published, shortly after, there was a debate that ensued, we are told, at Oxford University. Now, the true details, there is debate amongst experts on the true details of what was discussed. But one discussion has become very famous amongst those discussions. In the Huxley-Wilberforce debates. The Huxley-Wilberforce debates, which took place, we are told, in Oxford, in the United Kingdom, were between Huxley, a biologist, and Wilberforce, a priest. And Wilberforce was a rhetorician, a person who knew how to use words, a person who was very powerful and dynamic in terms of speech. Wilberforce, he opens the conversation and says that, Mr. Huxley, are you saying your grandmother or your grandfather is a descendant of an ape? Which one of them is a descendant of an ape? This led to laughter amongst all of the audience in attendance. Huxley was a smart man. Maybe not that gifted in rhetoric, but he was a smart man. He looked back at him, we are told according to this tale, that he looked back at Wilberforce and said, Mr. Wilberforce, if you are asking if I would rather that my mother or my grandmother was an ape, or I used my skill of speaking to dissuade and confuse the people, I would rather my grandmother was an ape. He's shedding light on a reality. What is the reality? That the concept of Darwinian evolution does not say that we came from apes. This is a narrative that has been infused into Islam from the Christian narrative. The Christian narrative, which for whatever reason either did not understand Darwinism or was afraid of Darwinism, for whatever reason, it created what's called a straw man argument in logic and debate. That is, they could not tackle the real issue, they created a straw man, a weaker argument that they could tackle. And as a result of that, it led to Muslims also adopting this narrative. You see, the worldview that you have is not your own. The worldview that you have has been adopted. It has been inherited, whether you realize it or not. Because those same schools, going back to Northern Africa, going back to, for example, the Middle East, for example, going back to India, including modern-day Pakistan and Bangladesh, the institutions that were being run, the top institutions where the aristocrats and the intelligentsia sent their students, were all run by the non-Muslim community. Therefore, that narrative that emerged was from that community. And therefore, whether it was conscious or not, by the way, there's no problem with living in a society of harmony amongst our comrades and our brethren in faith. There's no doubt about that. But what I'm trying to highlight is what experts have highlighted, that it compromised the Muslim worldview. Why? Allow me to explain. Because this worldview of Darwinian evolution, this concept, that's what Huxley was highlighting. It wasn't that man came from apes. Rather, it was this concept and this idea that it's possible that millions of years ago, apes and humans had a common ancestor. Why is that important? Because at least 3 Muslim philosophers had written about evolution before Charles Darwin. Who? Al-Jahiz, Naqshbandi, and At-Tusi. These 3 individuals had already highlighted the concept of evolution amongst the creation. In fact, this concept before Darwin published his work was well known as the Muhammadan concept or idea of evolution of creation. It was known in the 1700s, even before the publication. Therefore, the credit is given in our modern society based on who wrote the history. Is it necessarily that Islam is in contradiction with the theory? Not at all. However, it's possible that we use that theory of evolution and try to make it a law. In science, a law is something that has been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt in science. The theory is not a law. Why? Understand that it's possible there's gaps in the theory of evolution. A theory is evolving. It may be established, it may be changed. 100 years ago, scientists believed, there was an ether that permeated society, and we function throughout that ether. Well, today, the world realizes that that ether no longer exists. It was not true. That's the concept of a theory. Some things are true, some things may not be. They may be proved otherwise. I say this because there are gaps in the theory of evolution as well that one should be mindful and careful of. We'll consider that at another moment. But understand where the worldview is and where it should be. If there's a gap, am I believing in excessive scientism? What is excessive scientism? That I believe in a world devoid of God, and that science can replace God and replace religion. We're talking about that. Science has tremendous benefits. I'm repeating once again and again and again. But it should not take the place of God. Remember the blind men and the elephants. Having said this, we turn our hearts and our minds to those people, those personalities who had the strongest belief in a God-centric life. The Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam and their holy progeny. We're told on the day of Ashura, there is one young man who is from the family of Imam al-Hussein, from the camp of Imam al-Hussein. We are told that this young boy, this young man, he says a statement, a line for history, for the world's greatest logicians, scholars, philosophers and mystics to contemplate. What does he say? We are told his uncle asks him, this young boy who's but a teenager, if that, he says, the uncle says, oh Qasim, Qasim al-Qasim, how do you find death? He says, my uncle, ahla min al-asal. He says, my uncle, I find it sweeter than honey. What is it? Is this person morbid? Is he despondent? Is he depressed? No. He has understood a principle of life. That is, when you are on the path of truth, when you are standing for justice, when you are standing for peace, when you are standing for the reformation of society, whatever happens, you will understand that even if your life goes in this endeavor, it is the sweetest of moments. The same concept that the great ones of our modern world, such as the likes of Martin Luther, would say, that this idea that someone, you may be forced to make a decision at one moment, but if you don't make that stand, at that moment, you would have been dead even if you're still breathing. The same concept he has identified at that moment. Al-Qasim, he is asking for permission from Sayyid al-Shuhada. He says, my uncle, do you give me the permission to go towards the battlefield, to give my life, to fight courageously for you? The Imam does not give him the permission. After very, very long, after Qasim asks, he says, Al-Qasim, very well, I will give you the permission, but to go to the tent where your mother is, ask your mother Ramla to give you the permission to go to the battlefield. Al-Qasim goes, he proceeds, and when he proceeds, he speaks to his mother. He says, my mother, do you give me the permission to go to the battlefield? I just spoke to my uncle, he finally gave me the permission, but he said it is as if it is contingent upon you. If you give the permission, it is as if I have the permission. She is a mother, it's a mother's heart. Her husband, the father of Al-Qasim, Imam Hassan, has left this world. He has departed from this abode. Qasim is the only one Ramla has left. She says, Qasim, how am I to let you go? Qasim says, but am I not going to defend my uncle? Am I not going to defend him, to help him get victory? That is my purpose. That is my goal. That is why I am here. At that moment, Ramla says, very well. Sayyida Zainab comes and she helps to put the turban on the head of Al-Qasim, the turban of Al-Hassan Al-Mujtaba. She helps give the armor he wears. They put the armor on Al-Qasim. He goes, he gets on his horse and he proceeds towards the battlefield. When Al-Qasim proceeds, he begins to fight very courageously and he begins to fight very valiantly, but until a moment comes where the enemies surround Al-Qasim. When they surround Al-Qasim, they say there is a moment where his slipper falls. When the slipper falls, he goes towards it. An enemy strikes him on the head. When when the enemy strikes Al-Qasim on the head, he calls out, Adrikni ya Am ya Hussein. Oh, come to my assistance. Come to my aid, my uncle, oh Hussein. Imam al-Hussein runs towards Al-Qasim. He fights the enemy away. He takes Al-Qasim in his hands. Al-Qasim, who is the memory of his brother. Qasim, what have they done to you? They say Imam al-Hussein, he took the body of Qasim back to the tent. When he took the body of Al-Qasim back to the tent, they say Aliun al-Akbar had just been martyred a few moments earlier. He put the two bodies next to one another. When he put the two bodies one next to the other, some traditions say he began to wail and cry as if a mother cries for these two children. Imam al-Hussein, he is on the two bodies. It is as if Ramla is there. Ramla, the mother of Qasim, she wants to mourn her son. But how is she to mourn in front of Abu Abdullah? Abu Abdullah leaves the tent. She falls on the body of Al-Qasim. She cries over the body of her son Al-Qasim. The poets capture this moment that she says, according to the poets, I don't want anything from this world. I don't want any wealth. I don't want anything. Al-Hassan, my husband, is not here. And Al-Qasim, you have departed as well from me. No wealth, no material. I just want you, Qasim, who is there to bury your mother.
On Ashura, Hussein stood all alone. His companions had fallen one by one. At that point, even Al-Akbar was gone. So came to his aid Qasim, son of Hassan. Yes, O believers, Al-Qasim would come to Imam al-Hussein. He would stand in front of Abu Abdullah and he would say to him, "Oh, Uncle Hussein, allow me to go into the battlefield." Imam al-Hussein would look at him, he would say to him, "Oh Qasim, your father Imam al-Hassan left you with me to take care of you." And then Al-Qasim would reply to him, "Oh Abu Abdullah, and my father Al-Hassan asked me to take care of you, especially when you are standing on the plains of Karbala all alone." He said to represent him in the battlefield. Ha'ajarakum Allah. Imam al-Hussein would propel Qasim for battle. But how, O believers, when Imam al-Hussein would put the tents, he left a tent aside. He called that tent Khaymatul Hasan al-Masmum, the tent of the poisoned Hassan. Yes, he would take him into that tent. He would give him the amama of his father. He would give him the war clothes of his father. He would hand him the sword of his father. Then he tells him to go to the women, to his mother and to Sayyidah Zainab to send his farewells. Imagine when he walked into the tent, Sayyidah Zainab would shout, "Wa akha'ah, wa hasanah." She thought she saw her brother because of the resemblance that he had. Ajarakumullah. He would send his final farewells to his mother, to Sayyidah Zainab, to his aunties. But it's as if he has one last farewell, one last will that he wants to give his mother. He turns around to his mother, she says to her, "Oh mother, when you see youth, remember my youth. Oh mother, when you see someone thirsty, remember my thirst. If you drink water, remember my thirst." أوصيك يما وصيت سمعين لفظ جوابي، شبان لو شفتيهم بالله ذكر شبابي، محروم عطشان انا يا والده وقت الشرب ذكريني. Painful lines, yes, as if he says to her, يما ذكريني من تمر زفت شباب، من العرس محروم حنيتي دم المصاب، شمعة شبابي من يطفوها، حنيتي دمي وجفن دار التراب. Yes, he had a lot of youth to look forward to. He had a lot of in his life to look forward to. But Imam al-Hussein, when he asked him, he said to him, Bunay Qasim, how do you see death? He said to him, Uncle Hussein, for you and for this path, it is more beautiful than honey. Ha'ajarakumullah, it is sweeter than honey. Yes, he would go into the battlefield, fighting like a brave warrior, reminding them of his father Imam al-Hassan. Hajarakumullah, until one of the enemies would hit al-Qasim, but he would carry on fighting until his sandal would fall, until his sandal would rip loose. At that time it was not seen to be good if you were to walk barefoot, and the son of Imam al-Hassan, the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen, the son of Rasulullah, said he would never walk barefoot. Ajarakumullah. He went down to tie his sandal, then an enemy would come from behind and he hit al-Qasim on the head. أيوة سيدها وحسينها وقاسمها وحسنا. أجركم. He would lay on the plains of Karbala. He would shout out, Uncle Hussein, عليك مني السلام. Imam al-Hussein would start rushing, but people would look at Imam al-Hussein and he is going separate to the way that the voice is coming of al-Qasim. Someone says to him, Oh Aba Abdullah, al-Qasim's voice is coming from this side, you are running towards this side. He said to them, yes, I am going to take revenge for the son of my brother before I go to him. Ajarakumullah. And he would take revenge for his nephew, and he is the only person that Imam al-Hussein would do that for. From all of those who are martyred, Ajarakumullah, he would take his revenge instantly. Then he would come back to al-Qasim. He would lie beside him until his soul would depart this world. They were Qasima. بكى وناداه يا جاسم ايش بيدي. What can I do, oh Jasim? Oh Qasim, what can I do now? He started to cry. You left me all alone, and these are the enemies circling my tents. بجا وناداه يا جاسم شبيدي يا ريت السيف قبلك حز وريدي هايلكم تخلوني وحيدي وعلى خيمي يا عم القوم تفتر أجركم الله. It is narrated that when Imam al-Hussein carried al-Qasim, he carried him to his chest like this. Yes, imagine Imam al-Hussein carrying al-Qasim like this, who is filled with arrows, who is filled with wounds, and he would bring him. It is narrated al-Qasim, who is 14 years. He wasn't the tallest of those that were there. Imagine how broken Imam al-Hussein's back was, that the narrations tell us that al-Qasim's feet would drag on the floor as Imam al-Hussein is carrying him. He can't stand up straight as he carries him. He brings him to the tents. Ajarakumullah. He lies him between his brothers, between the rest of Banu Hashim. And the poet describes this beautifully. He says he brought him and he put him between his brothers. In what state, however? جاب ومدد ما بين اخوته قعد عدهم يا ويلي وهم موته بس ما سمع عن النسوان صوته اجت رملة تصيح الله اكبر انهدم ذاك البنيت وطاح يا بناي يا جاسم ليش بي قطعت يا بناي تبقى وياي كل ظن بيك يا بناي وتبارين لحد ما تدنى المنية هي والله وتبارين لحد ما تدنى هي المنية لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون.
صلى الله عليك يا رسول الله، صلى الله عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، صلى الله عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، صلى الله عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين.
محبوبي حسين محبوبي حسين يا ليل آهاتك وحروف حسراتك ضميت كلماتك بيني العبرة حنيت لمصابك ونيت ينبابك تانيت لجوابك يا ابني الزهرة شما اشتاق انا لعطرك تربة مرقدك اشتم ذكرك لو يمر عالبال صاحي وباسمك اتحلم كل موكب من اسمع صوت يا حسين اتألم ذبتك لو سما يا بن فاطمة راية مرقدك لو لامست خد الهوى يموت ما شفتك لجن صرت انت الوطن يا مسمع تراث البي عشيت كل عمري عالصوت يا اول عشيك حملني جروح انا دون البشر محبوبي مذبوح محبوبي حسين محبوبي حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين يا حسين روحي ضميتك عمري سميتك بقلبي حاجيتك عيني تشوفك أقراك ليلي أبجيك يومي عمري وتالي ديني جفوفك أمشي بديرتي وانظر نار حبجي لهمومك دود البس ثياب السود يلي سلبة وهدومك ناحرم العزاك يفوح واعرف شي اقرب يومك انشر لك لواء اعلان العزاء حزنك نجتمع بالخيمة ونواس الزكية رب العاشقين انت يا حسين خليت القلب كل دهر عايش بالرزية دمعة مجلسك بس عاشت الروح أنا دون البشر محبوبي مذبوح محبوبي حسين محبوبي حسين